My name is Hannah Parker. I'm 24 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my parents had one promise for me. The college fund was mine. It wasn't some vague idea or whispered reassurance. It was spoken aloud dozens of times as I grew up. At family dinners, when report cards came in, when I sat at the table with SAT prep books spread around me, my dad would grin and say, "Keep up the good work, Hannah. That college fund is waiting for you." It wasn't just money. To me, it was hope. It was my future. You see, I grew up in a family where favoritism wasn't just subtle, it was blatant. My older brother, Nathan, was the golden child. Handsome, athletic, charming. My parents doted on him. Every Little League game, every school play, every half-hearted achievement, he got a standing ovation from them.
Me?
I was the quiet one. The bookworm. The girl who worked after-school shifts at the diner, who stayed up late writing essays, who dreamed of studying architecture and designing spaces that could change people's lives. And while my parents rarely came to my school events, they always had one thing to say when I asked why Nathan got so much more attention. "Because you're different, Hannah. You're the responsible one. You'll go far. You have your college fund." It became my anchor. Through every missed birthday party, through every evening when Mom gushed about Nathan's new girlfriend while ignoring my acceptance letter into the state university, I told myself, at least I have the fund. At least my future is safe. By the time I graduated high school, that fund had grown to nearly $60,000. Dad liked to brag that it was from years of saving, Christmas bonuses, extra shifts, smart investments. "We want you to graduate debt-free," he said proudly. "We never had that chance, but you will." I believed him. I got into my dream program at a well-respected university across the country. My heart soared. I could finally step into the life I had imagined for myself. The tuition wasn't cheap, but with the college fund, I knew I could cover it without drowning in loans. Or so I thought. The first crack in the illusion came at dinner one evening, a few weeks before orientation. I had just received my official tuition bill, $14,000 for the first semester. I slid the paper across the table toward Dad. "Looks like the first payment's due by August 15th, I said, smiling nervously. "Should I give the university the account number, or do you want to transfer it directly?" The silence that followed was strange. Dad cleared his throat. Mom suddenly found her plate very interesting. Nathan, of course, smirked like he knew some secret I didn't. Finally, Dad spoke. "We'll, need to discuss that." I frowned. "Discuss what?" "It's just the tuition bill. You've always said the fund was for me." Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "Hannah, don't start. It's been a stressful few weeks." That was all they gave me. No explanation. Just awkward glances, Nathan's smug grin, and a pit forming in my stomach. A week later, I found out the truth. I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my email, when I overheard Mom on the phone. Her voice was soft but excited. "Yes, the flights are booked. The resort looks amazing, 5 stars, all-inclusive. Nathan and Sophie deserve it. A 3-week honeymoon in the Maldives doesn't come cheap, but it'll be worth it. After all, you only get married once." I froze. My chest tightened. The words slammed into me one by one: flights, resort, honeymoon, Maldives. I stumbled back, gripping the counter. When she hung up, I confronted her. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking. "The Maldives? You used to use my college fund." She flinched, her hand rising to her chest. "Hannah, listen." "No." My voice cracked. "Tell me the truth. You used it, didn't you?" Her silence was enough. My knees buckled. I sank into a chair, my world spinning. "That money was mine," I choked out. "You promised me." "My entire future." Mom's face hardened. "Don't be so dramatic. Nathan is starting his life with Sophie. He needed our help more than you do. You'll manage, you're smart, you'll get scholarships, loans. You'll figure it out. You always do." My heart shattered. My brother's honeymoon. My college fund.
Gone.
All those nights, I stayed home studying while he partied. All those times I worked shifts while he borrowed Dad's credit card. All those years of being told to wait my turn. And when my turn finally came, they gave it away. For him. I went upstairs, locked myself in my room, and cried until my body ached. But somewhere in that ocean of tears, something changed. A fire sparked. If they thought they could erase my future for a vacation, if they thought I would quietly accept being sacrificed for Nathan's happiness, they were wrong. They had taken my college fund. But I still had something they didn't expect. My voice. And soon, they would hear it loud and clear.
I didn't sleep that night.
My pillow was soaked with tears, my body twisted in knots of anger and disbelief. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words flashing in my head like neon lights. They used it for Nathan. They used it for a honeymoon. The college fund wasn't just money. It was a promise, a lifeline, a chance to break free from the pattern of sacrifice I had been forced into since childhood. And they had handed it over like it meant nothing. The next morning, I went downstairs. My parents were already at the table, sipping coffee like it was just another day. Nathan was scrolling through his phone, grinning at something Sophie had sent him. I stood there, gripping the banister so tightly my knuckles went white. Why didn't you tell me? My voice was raw, hoarse from the hours of crying. Dad looked up, blinking as though I'd asked about the weather. Tell you what? The fund, I spat. My fund. You spent it. On Nathan. Silence. A long, heavy silence that seemed to stretch the walls of the room. Finally, Dad sighed, setting his mug down. Hannah, let's be reasonable. Reasonable? My voice cracked. You stole $60,000 from me. Mom flinched at the word stole, but she didn't deny it. Dad leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. It wasn't stealing. That money came from our pockets. We saved it. It's ours to manage. No, I shot back. You told me, my whole life, that it was mine. You made me believe I had a future because of it. Mom's voice softened, like she was explaining something to a child. Sweetheart, we had to make a choice. Nathan just got married. He needed support. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him and Sophie. I laughed bitterly, a sound that didn't even feel like it came from me. And what about me? What about my once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to college without drowning in debt? Does that mean nothing? Nathan finally looked up from his phone, smirking. Relax, Hannah. It's just money. You're smart. You'll get scholarships. Loans are normal. Everyone has them. The fury in my chest burned hotter. Easy for you to say. You never worked for anything. You've had everything handed to you, and now you've taken the one thing I had. His smirk faltered, but he didn't argue. He didn't need to. Mom and Dad jumped in like bodyguards. Hannah, Dad said firmly, you need to calm down. This family has sacrificed plenty for you. Don't act like we've given you nothing. I stared at him, my whole body trembling. You're right. You didn't give me nothing. You gave me a lie. For years, you dangled that fund in front of me like a prize. And when the time came, you ripped it away. Mom's voice sharpened. Watch your tone, young lady. We are your parents. We don't owe you explanations. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake them until they understood. But I knew, deep down, they never would. To them, I would always be the one who didn't deserve as much. The one who could manage without. The one they could take from without guilt. I stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, before finally whispering, I'll never forgive you for this. And then I walked out the door. The next few days were a blur. I avoided home as much as possible, crashing at my friend Kayla's apartment and trying to figure out how I could possibly pay for school now. She was furious when I told her what happened. That's theft, Hannah. Pure and simple. I know, I muttered. But they don't see it that way. They think because it came from their paychecks, they can just do whatever they want with it. Kayla shook her head. If my parents ever did that, I'd sue them. I laughed bitterly. Suing your own parents? That's insane. Is it? She pressed. You had a verbal agreement. They promised you that money. And now you're stuck without it. At the very least, you should make them face what they've done. Her words stuck with me. For years, I'd been silent, swallowing every unfairness, every slight. But this wasn't just another disappointment. This was my future. And maybe it was time they finally paid for what they'd done. A week later, Nathan and Sophie returned from their honeymoon. They came back sunburned, glowing, giddy with stories of luxury resorts, oceanfront dinners, and private boat rides. I happened to be in the living room when they walked through the door, luggage in tow. "Hey, sis," Nathan grinned, pulling out his phone to show me a picture. "Check this out. Maldives sunsets are unreal. You'd love it there someday." My blood boiled. Someday? You mean when someone else sacrifices their future to pay for it? His smile faltered. "Oh, come on. Don't start again." Mom appeared behind him, carrying one of Sophie's bags. "Hannah, please. Let's not ruin their return with this nonsense."
Nonsense.
I hissed. "You think it's nonsense that I can't pay for college now? That I have to beg for loans because you wanted Nathan to sip cocktails in the Maldives?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic. It's not like you were going to Harvard. You could have gone somewhere cheaper." My chest heaved. That money wasn't about Harvard. It was about the promise you all made to me. And you broke it. For the first time, Sophie spoke up. Her voice was small but cutting. "Honestly, Hannah, it's just money. Don't let it ruin your relationship with your family." I turned on her, my voice low and sharp. Easy to say when you're sitting on a beach bought with my future. Her face flushed. Nathan stepped in front of her, glaring at me. "You're out of line." I stared back at him, something icy settling in my chest.
No, Nathan.
For the first time in my life, I'm in line, and you're all going to pay for what you did. That night, I sat at Kayla's desk with my laptop open, scrolling through my tuition statements and financial aid options. The numbers swam in front of me, a mountain of debt waiting to swallow me whole. But then, an idea began to take shape. If they thought it was just money, if they thought they could brush it off as a family sacrifice, then fine. I would make it about money. I would make it painfully, inescapably real. I opened a blank document and typed at the top, "Invoice." Line by line, I began listing every expense for the semester: tuition, housing, books, fees. And at the bottom, in bold letters, total, $14,372. Due. Immediately. It wasn't just paper. It was a statement. A mirror held up to their betrayal. And when I handed it to them, they would finally see me, not as the quiet daughter who always managed, but as the woman who wasn't afraid to send the bill. I sat staring at the printed invoice for nearly an hour, the bold black letters burning into my eyes. It wasn't just paper. It was the physical embodiment of everything they had stolen from me. Tuition, housing, books, fees. My future, written down in numbers. At the bottom, in crisp, sharp letters. Total due, $14,372. Payment required immediately. I signed it at the bottom like I was a creditor. Because, in a way, I was. They thought I would swallow their betrayal, just like I had swallowed every snub, every slight, every comparison to Nathan. But this time, I had evidence. This time, they couldn't brush it off as nonsense or call me dramatic. This time, I would make them feel it. The following evening, I found them all in the living room. Dad was flipping through the sports channel. Mom was scrolling on her iPad. Nathan and Sophie were lounging on the couch, scrolling through honeymoon photos, still glowing with tans and grins. I walked in holding the envelope like it was a weapon. "Family meeting," I said firmly. Dad frowned without looking up. "Now? I'm busy." "Not anymore," I shot back, dropping the envelope on the coffee table. "Open it." Mom glanced at it, frowning. "What is this?" "An invoice," I said. My voice was steady, even though my heart hammered in my chest. "For my first semester of college. The bill you owe me." Nathan let out a laugh. "You've got to be kidding." "Do I look like I'm kidding?" I snapped, my hazel eyes blazing as I fixed them one by one with my stare. Dad finally leaned forward and ripped open the envelope. His eyes flicked down the page, scanning the list of charges. For a moment, his face was unreadable. Then he barked out a laugh. You've lost your mind, he said, tossing the paper back onto the table. Mom shook her head in disappointment, her voice dripping with condescension. Hannah, this is childish. Families don't send invoices. Yes, I said sharply. They do, when families steal from them. The room went still. You stole my college fund. You used it for Nathan's vacation. So now you're going to pay me back. Nathan smirked, leaning back on the couch. Oh, come on, Hannah. You think this is how the world works? Life's not fair. You'll figure it out like everyone else. My chest tightened. That fund wasn't yours to spend. It was mine, promised to me since I was a kid. You had no right to touch it. Mom's tone hardened. We had every right. We're the parents. We decide what's best for the family. No, I said, my voice trembling with fury. You decided what was best for Nathan. You always do. Dad leaned forward, pointing a finger at me. Watch yourself. You're treading on dangerous ground. I stared at him, my whole body shaking. What are you going to do?
Disown me?
Pretend I don't exist? Newsflash, Dad, you've already done that my whole life. The difference is now, I don't care anymore. The room erupted. Sophie muttered something about me being ungrateful. Nathan started yelling about how I was selfish. Mom's voice cracked as she told me I was tearing the family apart. But through it all, I stood firm, my eyes locked on Dad. You owe me, I said calmly, my voice cutting through their noise. And until you pay, you'll be reminded every single day.
And I meant it.
The next morning, I slid copies of the invoice under their bedroom doors. I emailed it to their joint account. I left one taped to the fridge, circled in red marker. When Dad left for work, I slipped one into his briefcase. When Mom sat down at the computer, another was waiting on the keyboard. And every time they rolled their eyes or threw one in the trash, I printed another. They thought it was a game at first, but soon it stopped being funny. One evening, Dad came storming into my room holding a crumpled copy. Enough of this nonsense, he bellowed. You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said coldly, looking him straight in the eyes. I'm embarrassing you, and I'll keep doing it until you do the right thing. He glared at me, veins bulging in his neck, but for the first time, he didn't have a comeback. He just stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Nathan wasn't any better. He strutted around the house bragging about their honeymoon, rubbing salt into the wound. One night, I cornered him in the kitchen. Do you even feel guilty? I asked, my voice sharp. He raised an eyebrow. Guilty? For what? Mom and Dad wanted to help me. Not my fault you couldn't handle it. My blood boiled. Not your fault? You let them gut my future, so you could sip cocktails on a beach. And you didn't even hesitate. He smirked. Life's about taking what's given, Hannah. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, you'd have more fun. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms.
Fun?
You call destroying my chance at college fun? You're pathetic. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Careful. You sound jealous. I stared at him, my whole body trembling. I'm not jealous. I'm disgusted. And one day, Nathan, when Mom and Dad aren't here to protect you, the world is going to chew you up. And I hope I'm there to see it. For the first time, his smirk faltered. The tension in the house grew unbearable. Mom begged me to just move on. Dad tried to intimidate me with lectures about respect. Nathan mocked me every chance he got. But I didn't waver. I printed new invoices. I posted one on the bathroom mirror. I tucked one into Dad's car visor. I even mailed one to their office address. I wanted them to see, every single day, what they had done. And slowly, I saw the cracks forming. Mom stopped meeting my eyes at breakfast. Dad grew quieter, angrier. Even Nathan avoided me sometimes, muttering under his breath when I entered the room. For the first time, they weren't in control. For the first time, they were the ones squirming. One night, after another screaming match, I sat alone at my desk. The invoices weren't enough. They were irritated, sure. Embarrassed, maybe. But not enough to make them take me seriously. If I wanted real change, if I wanted them to truly understand, I had to go further. I had to make the betrayal public. Because if they thought they could humiliate me quietly, I would humiliate them loudly. And the best part? I didn't even have to lie. All I had to do was tell the truth. When you've been silenced your whole life, the first time you speak up feels like fire in your chest. That's how it felt when I decided the invoices weren't enough anymore. My parents could crumple them, shred them, laugh at them behind closed doors. But if everyone else knew what they had done, they wouldn't be able to hide. They had humiliated me by stealing my future and brushing it off as not a big deal. Now it was my turn. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. A week after Nathan and Sophie returned from their luxury honeymoon, Mom announced we'd be hosting a family brunch. She wanted to show off pictures from the trip, and of course, Nathan was eager to brag. Normally, I would have avoided it. The thought of sitting at that table while they passed around photos of beaches bought with my college fund made my stomach churn. But then, a thought came, what better place than this? The brunch wasn't just family. My grandparents would be there.
Aunts.
Uncles. Cousins. People who had always believed my parents' narrative that Nathan was the shining star and I was the responsible but forgettable one. If my parents wanted to make me invisible, I would make them exposed. The morning of the brunch, I dressed with care. A simple cream blouse, navy skirt, and silver necklace, professional, understated, but strong. I gathered my binder of invoices and supporting documents, screenshots of tuition bills, copies of emails about financial aid, even the original savings account statements I'd found tucked in Dad's filing cabinet. I was nervous. My palms were slick with sweat. But every time I pictured Nathan's smug face holding up a glass of champagne on a white sand beach, my spine straightened. This was my moment. The brunch began as expected, Mom bustling in the kitchen, Dad greeting everyone like a proud host, Nathan and Sophie scrolling through hundreds of honeymoon photos. Look at this view, Sophie gushed, showing a picture of their private villa. 5-star resort, Nathan added casually. All-inclusive. Worth every penny. I clenched my teeth. My grandparents cooed. My uncle clapped Nathan on the back. Your folks must be proud. That's not a cheap trip. Dad chuckled, puffing his chest. Well, we do what we can for our children. That was it. I couldn't sit silent any longer. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. Really, Dad? You do what you can for your children? Or just for Nathan? The room froze. All eyes turned to me. Mom's smile faltered. Hannah, not now. Yes, now. My voice was steady, louder than I'd ever spoken in that house. Since everyone's here, let's tell the truth. My parents didn't just help Nathan. They stole my college fund, the money they promised me for my future, and spent it on his honeymoon. Gasps echoed around the table. My grandmother's fork clattered against her plate. My uncle frowned in confusion. Dad's face turned red. That's enough. But I pressed on, pulling the binder from my bag. Here's the invoice for my tuition. Here are the account statements showing the money was there and gone. Here's the bill I sent them to replace what they took. I laid the papers on the table, pushing them toward my relatives. They chose cocktails and beaches for Nathan over my education, and then told me to get over it. The silence that followed was deafening. My grandmother looked horrified. My uncle shook his head. My cousins whispered. Finally, my grandfather spoke, his voice sharp. Robert, is this true? Dad stammered. It's more complicated than she makes it sound. Complicated? I shot back. It's simple. They took my future and handed it to Nathan like a wedding gift. Nathan slammed his fist on the table. Stop making me the villain. I didn't ask them to use your money. I turned on him, my hazel eyes burning. No, but you didn't say no either. You knew it wasn't yours. You knew it was mine. And you didn't care. His jaw clenched, but he had no reply. Mom's voice cracked as she tried to recover. We were just trying to keep the family happy. By destroying one child to celebrate another? I cut in. That's not family. That's betrayal. For once, no one rushed to cover for them. No one laughed it off. The evidence was right there, staring them in the face. My grandmother finally shook her head, her voice trembling. I always knew you spoiled Nathan, but this is unforgivable. Mom's face went pale. Dad's shoulders slumped. Nathan glared at me like he wanted to strangle me, but he stayed silent. The tide had shifted. For the rest of brunch, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My relatives whispered among themselves, shooting disapproving looks at my parents. No one wanted to hear about Nathan's honeymoon anymore. No one asked for more pictures. When dessert was served, I stood again. This is the last invoice I'll send you. I slid another copy across the table to my parents. $14, $3.72. You can pay me back, or you can keep living with the shame of everyone knowing what you did. And with that, I walked out. That night, my phone blew up with messages. From my aunt. I had no idea, Hannah. Good for you, for speaking up. From my cousin. They should be ashamed. We're with you. Even from my grandmother. Don't let them silence you anymore. You did the right thing. For the first time, the story wasn't just mine to carry. Everyone knew. Everyone saw the truth.
And my parents couldn't take that back.
Of course, they tried. The next morning, Dad stormed into my room, his face red with fury. You humiliated us in front of the entire family. You humiliated yourselves, I replied calmly. All I did was tell the truth. Mom wrung her hands, her voice breaking. Hannah, please, we can work this out privately. Like you worked it out privately when you stole my fund? I snapped.
No.
This doesn't stay private anymore. They glared at me, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the scared daughter begging for scraps of approval. I was the one holding the power. And I wasn't done yet. Because if they thought a little family shame was enough to break me, they hadn't seen anything yet. The next step would make them feel the betrayal in their bones. The bill wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was a promise. And soon, they would pay it in full. The family brunch had been the first real victory of my life against my parents. For once, the whispers weren't about how sensitive I was or how I overreacted. They were about what my parents had done, about how cruel and reckless it was to gut my future for Nathan's fun. But while public shame had rattled them, it wasn't enough. They could hide from gossip. They could pretend it would blow over. And deep down, I knew them well enough to understand this. The only language my parents truly respected was money. So, if they wanted to treat me like a business expense they could redirect, then fine. I would treat them like debtors. And I would collect. The Monday after brunch, I sat at Kayla's kitchen table, my laptop open. So you're serious, she said, raising her brows as she leaned over to read my screen. Dead serious, I said, scrolling through legal resources. If they don't want to pay me back voluntarily, I'll make them. You mean, she lowered her voice, take them to small claims court? I nodded. The fun was promised to me my entire life. I have evidence, emails, account statements, even witnesses who heard them say it. They think I won't fight because I'm their daughter. But I will. Kayla grinned, eyes wide with a mix of pride and disbelief. God, I love this new version of you. I laughed bitterly. This new version of me is broke, angry, and running on caffeine. But she's not weak anymore. The first step was formalizing the invoice. I retyped it on legal-looking letterhead, stamped it final notice, and included a 30-day payment deadline. At the bottom, I added a warning: failure to pay may result in legal action. When I slipped it into their mailbox, my hands shook, but my heart pounded with a thrill I couldn't explain. It felt like drawing a line in the sand. That evening, Dad stormed into my room, waving the notice like a flag. What the hell is this? I sat calmly at my desk, laptop open. It's an invoice. Payments due in 30 days. You think you can threaten us with court? His face was red, veins standing out at his temples. It's not a threat, I said evenly. It's a promise. Mom hovered behind him, wringing her hands. Hannah, please. We're family. Families don't sue each other. I looked at her, my hazel eyes cold. Families also don't steal $60,000 from their own child. Yet here we are. Dad slammed the paper down on my desk. You're ungrateful. We gave you a roof, food, clothes. And then you stole my future. I cut in sharply. I won't let you rewrite that.
For a moment, I thought he might explode.
But instead, he just glared, muttered something about me being out of control, and stormed out. I sat back, my hands trembling, but a smile tugged at my lips. For the first time, the fear was his. In the following weeks, I doubled down. I sent certified copies of the invoice, so they couldn't pretend they didn't receive them. I CC'd Nathan and Sophie in the emails. I even texted reminders. Payment due in 15 days. Interest may accrue. Nathan, of course, found it hilarious. One night he cornered me in the hall. You think this makes you tough? Suing your own parents? You're pathetic. I looked him square in the eye. No, Nathan. What's pathetic is a grown man who lets mommy and daddy steal from his sister, so he can sip margaritas in the Maldives. His smirk cracked for the first time. Word spread fast. My aunt texted me. Heard you might take them to court. Good. They need a wake-up call. My grandmother called, her voice soft but firm. Hannah, I don't like families fighting, but you're right. They wronged you. Don't back down. Even my cousin, who had always idolized Nathan, sent me a message. Honestly, I can't believe they did that. You deserve better. It was like the universe was finally shifting. For years, no one had taken my side. Now, people weren't just listening, they were supporting me. And my parents hated it. Dad grew more withdrawn, stomping around the house in silence. Mom cried more often, muttering about how I was ruining the family. Nathan avoided me altogether.
Good.
Let them stew. But I wasn't finished. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a thought came. If they won't feel the weight of my pain through words, they'll feel it through their wallets. The next day, I researched average legal fees and court filing costs. Then I added a new line item to the invoice. Additional fees for breach of trust. $5,000. When I handed them the updated version at dinner, Dad nearly choked on his food. You can't just add numbers like that, he roared. I met his fury with calm. You can't just steal 60 grand either. Yet you did. Mom burst into tears. Nathan muttered something about me being psychotic. But I didn't care. The invoice sat there between us like a mirror they couldn't look away from. Still, part of me worried. Could I really take them to court? Would a judge even take me seriously? Kayla squeezed my hand when I confessed my doubts. Even if you don't go through with it, Hannah, you've already won. They're scared. They're cornered. And they know it. She was right. For the first time, the power balance had shifted. And then, the real turning point came. 2 weeks before the payment deadline, Sophie called me. Not Nathan. Not Mom. Not Dad. Sophie. Hannah. Her voice was quiet, nervous. Can we talk? I frowned.
About what?
About the money, she whispered. I think Nathan's parents should pay you back. I don't agree with what they did. Her voice shook, like she was scared of even admitting it. For a moment, I was speechless. Then I whispered, Why are you telling me this? Because Nathan won't listen, she said softly. And because I don't want to start my marriage knowing it was built on something that hurt you. I sat there in stunned silence. Sophie, the outsider, was the first one to crack. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth. About forcing them all to see what they had done, to sit in the discomfort of their betrayal. And if Sophie was already starting to see it, it meant the cracks were spreading. The deadline loomed closer. Dad grumbled louder. Mom cried harder. Nathan sulked more. And me? I grew stronger. Because every day that passed without payment was one step closer to the final blow. One step closer to the moment they would realize I wasn't just sending them a bill. I was sending them justice. And they couldn't afford the price. The day circled in red ink on my calendar finally arrived. The invoice deadline. 30 days since I'd formally billed my parents for my tuition. 30 days since I'd told them the truth they'd never wanted to hear. And 30 days of silence from them. No payments. No apologies. No acknowledgement beyond slammed doors and bitter mutters about ungrateful children. but I was ready. That morning, I slipped into a navy blazer and packed a folder with every piece of documentation I had. The invoices, the account statements, the emails, even a transcript of the brunch confrontation. I wasn't bluffing anymore. If they didn't pay, I was filing in small claims court. When I walked into the kitchen, Dad was sipping coffee, Mom stirring sugar into her tea, Nathan scrolling his phone. It looked so normal, like we were an ordinary family. But the air was thick with tension, like a storm waiting to break. "Today's the deadline," I said flatly, dropping the folder on the table. "Pay me back or I file." Dad scoffed without looking up. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, my hazel eyes burning. "Try me." Mom's hand trembled on her teacup. "Hannah, please. Think about what you're doing. Families don't drag each other into court. Families also don't steal from their children," I snapped. "But you did. So now you live with the consequences." Nathan finally looked up, smirking. "What judge is going to side with you? It's Mom and Dad's money. They raised you. You owe them, not the other way around." I clenched my fists.
No, Nathan.
"They owe me, and deep down you know it." For a moment his smirk wavered. "I gave them until midnight. Then I went to Kayla's, where she had pizza and energy drinks waiting." "Ready to press send?" she asked, pointing to the court filing website on my laptop. I stared at the screen, my cursor hovering over the button. My hand shook, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. Once I filed, there was no going back. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." I clicked. The confirmation email hit my inbox seconds later. "Case filed."
Kayla cheered.
"You did it." I exhaled, my chest tight but lighter somehow. I did. The news spread faster than I expected. By the weekend, my grandparents knew, my aunts knew, my cousins knew. And just like before, most of them sided with me. "She's right," my grandmother told Mom over the phone, loud enough that I overheard. "You wronged her. You should pay her back before this gets worse." Mom cried. Dad raged. Nathan sulked. But none of them wrote a check. Court day came 2 weeks later. I walked into the small claims courtroom in a navy dress, folder clutched in my hands, heart pounding. My parents were already seated at the defendant's table. Mom looked pale and tired, Dad red-faced and stiff in his suit. Nathan sat in the back, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally declared war on him. Maybe I had. The judge called the case. I stood, my knees shaking but my voice steady. "Your Honor," I began, "my parents promised me a college fund since childhood. That fund was in a dedicated account for years. I have bank statements proving its existence. I also have testimony from relatives who heard them confirm the fund was mine. But when it came time to pay for my tuition, I discovered the account had been emptied. They used it to pay for my brother's honeymoon." The judge raised an eyebrow, clearly shocked. I laid out the evidence, one page at a time. The tuition invoice, the bank statements, the binder of letters and emails. Then my father stood, his voice booming. "Your Honor, this is absurd. That money came from my paycheck. It was never hers to begin with. We supported her whole life, food, housing, clothing. And now she wants to sue us for more?" The judge's gaze was sharp. "Sir, did you not tell your daughter this money was for her education?" Dad hesitated. His jaw clenched. "It was discussed." "Discussed," I repeated, my voice cutting. "No, Your Honor. It was promised. Repeatedly. For years. And I built my future around that promise." Mom finally stood, tears streaming down her face. "We just wanted to help our son. He was starting his marriage. We didn't mean to hurt Hannah." The judge's expression hardened. "But you did. And intent doesn't erase consequences." When the ruling came, my breath caught. In the matter of Parker versus Parker, the judge said, "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants are ordered to repay the amount of $14,372 immediately." My knees almost buckled. Relief surged through me like a tidal wave. Dad's face turned scarlet. Mom sobbed into a tissue. Nathan muttered something under his breath, his fists clenched. But none of it mattered. I had won. That night, I went home to find a check waiting on the kitchen counter. $14,372, signed by Dad's furious hand. Beside it, a note in Mom's handwriting. "We hope this makes you happy. Don't contact us for a while." I held the check in my hands, my chest tight. It didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't erase the years of favoritism. But it was proof that they couldn't walk all over me anymore. The following week, I deposited the money and paid my tuition. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. My future was mine again. But the victory came with a cost. Mom didn't speak to me for weeks. Dad stomped around the house, muttering about ingratitude. Nathan refused to look me in the eye. And yet, I didn't regret it. Because for once, they had to face consequences. For once, I wasn't the quiet, forgotten daughter. I was the one who stood up. Still, deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because $14,372 was only the beginning. The fund had been nearly $60,000 once. And I wanted it all. Not just the money, the acknowledgement, the apology, the respect I had been denied my whole life. And if I had to send another bill to get it, I would. Winning in court should have been the end of it. I had the check in my account, my tuition paid, and for the first time in my life, my parents couldn't dismiss me as dramatic or ungrateful. A judge had declared, in no uncertain terms, that I was right and they were wrong. But every time I looked at the deposit slip, my stomach twisted. $14,372 covered the semester. But the original college fund had been nearly $60,000. That money wasn't just tuition, it was housing, books, transportation, breathing room. It was a promise of stability my parents had bragged about for years, only to rip away in one selfish act. They had given Nathan a dream honeymoon. All I got was a fraction of what was mine. And I wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I sat at Kayla's kitchen table again, typing up a new document. At the top, final bill for breach of trust. This time, I wasn't just charging for tuition. I itemized everything. The remaining balance of the original fund, interest for the years they'd promised it, emotional damages in the form of therapy bills I had already started incurring. At the bottom, the total stared back at me, $46,000. I added a deadline, 60 days. And one final line in bold. Failure to pay will result in further legal escalation and public disclosure. Kayla leaned over my shoulder, whistling low. Damn, Hannah. You're not pulling punches anymore. I shook my head. They treated me like a child they could walk over. I'm done playing small. I delivered the bill during Sunday dinner. They hadn't spoken much to me since the court ruling. Dad kept his distance. Mom avoided my eyes. Nathan sneered every chance he got. But that night, I walked in calm and collected, envelope in hand. When the plates were cleared, I slid it across the table. Dad frowned. "What's this?" "Your final bill," I said simply. He ripped it open, scanning the numbers. His face went from pale to purple in seconds. "You've got to be kidding me. $46,000. Mom gasped, clutching her chest. "Hannah, this is outrageous." "No," I said, my voice steady. What was outrageous was stealing from me in the first place. That fund was nearly $60,000. You've paid back a portion, but the debt isn't settled. This is the balance. Dad slammed the paper down. "We're not paying you another cent." I leaned forward, my hazel eyes sharp. "Then I'll escalate.
Court again.
Or maybe I'll go public. Post the truth online. Send the story to the local paper. Parents steal daughter's college fund for son's honeymoon. Want to see how that headline looks with your names attached?" Mom's face drained of color. Nathan swore under his breath. "You wouldn't," Dad spat. I smiled coldly. "Try me." For weeks, the house was a war zone. Dad barked about respect and family loyalty. Mom wept about me, tearing the family apart. Nathan mocked me every chance he got, though less confidently now. But I stood my ground. I mailed certified copies of the bill. I texted reminders of the deadline. I even sent one to Sophie, just to twist the knife. And then something surprising happened. Sophie called me again. "Hannah," she said softly, "I talked to Nathan. He won't admit it, but he knows this isn't fair. I think I can convince him to talk to your parents about paying the rest." I was stunned. "Why would you help me?" "Because I don't want our marriage to be built on someone else's suffering," she whispered. "And because you're right. You deserve this." For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. The deadline came. I walked into the kitchen to find an envelope on the table. Inside was a check, $46,000. Signed, dated, final. Beside it, a note in my father's handwriting. "This is the last you'll ever get from us.
Don't contact us again."
I stared at the check, my chest tight. It wasn't the apology I wanted. It wasn't the love I'd craved all my life. But it was money they had no choice but to give back. Money that was mine from the start. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need their apology anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had forced them to see me, to pay for their betrayal, to finally treat me as someone they couldn't erase. That night, I deposited the check. The teller raised her brows at the amount, but I just smiled faintly.
"Long story," I said.
Walking out of the bank, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just about the money. It was about justice. About standing up to the people who had silenced me my whole life and refusing to be quiet anymore. They had used my future as a down payment for Nathan's honeymoon. But I had sent them the bill. And in the end, they paid.